Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today, let's talk about these Marvel Disney lawsuits. Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I am your host, Brent, and today I wanted to share some quick thoughts about these Marvel Disney lawsuits. So, if you haven't been paying attention, I think it broke yesterday. The families of some prominent older deceased comics creators have filed their basically like a copyright claim on the characters that were created for Marvel back in the 60s. We're talking Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, some other characters coming out of Amazing Fantasy and Strange Tales. So you have the families of Steve Ditko, Stan Lee, I think one or two others, Gene Colan was involved. And basically, Disney filed some counter lawsuits against these families and their, these creators and their heirs. I don't think the creators any of them are still living. But this is kind of a weird, complicated place in comics to be, right? So basically what's going on is now you have the repetition of what happened with the Superman heirs years and years ago. So if you're not familiar with copyright law, and I forgive you, I'm not very familiar with it either, the basic gist of it is at a certain point, any copyrighted work after a certain period of time can become public domain. This is why you're walking around in Barnes & Noble and you're in the fiction section and you see 4 different copies of Dracula, all from different publishers, as well as the special Barnes & Noble hardbound edition of Dracula for like $8. Now that might be more or less than the ones from the other publishers. That's because Dracula and other classic tales like It, Frankenstein, Great Expectations, in general, if they're over 75 years old, they're in the public domain. It's the same reason why you can go on any ebook store and look for a free version of these classic tales. It's because they're in the public domain. Anybody can freely produce a tale, a movie based on one of these things if it's in the public domain. So that's how you can get competing versions of The Jungle Book coming out from Netflix and Disney in the same year, right? Jungle Book was in the public domain. There was no claim to the copyright there. Look at these awesome God rays I'm getting in this car. I love this car. Anyway, so the same thing happened with Superman years ago. Superman was coming up in the public domain. I want to say it was like 73 or 75 years, something like that. And the Superman heirs have long had a contentious relationship with DC and Warner Brothers about getting proper compensation. I mean, Superman's created in 1938, 39. Years and years ago, nobody knew that this character was going to blow up and be a $1 billion, $1 trillion franchise. By now, I think it's probably $1 trillion, maybe, who knows, with all the licensing deals and everything. So how is it fair? The question is always this: how is it fair that the families of the creators, or the creators themselves, and when I say families, I'm talking about, maybe the immediate family, like the sons, the daughters, grandchildren. I don't know. I don't really feel bad for grandkids from something their grandparents did. But generally, the sons, the heirs, sons and daughters are the people I'm talking about, the families. A brother, sister, I don't know. Generally, when I'm saying heirs, I'm thinking like immediate children. But is it fair for the families of these creators to not be properly compensated from a creation that blew up past anybody's imagination? Now, in the 1930s, this thing as a work-for-hire contract may or may not have existed. Was it always so robust to include these trillion-dollar franchises? Nobody had any idea at the time of what Batman and Superman were going to become. For a long time, there was a legal battle about Superboy. And now they've worked all this out with the Superman side, which is now why you see in any DC comic book or at the end of a TV show, it says Superman created by Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, and then there's like a by special arrangement from I don't know if it's the Schuster family or something like that, had this added on where it's like a legal requirement now anytime the Superman character is used to recognize the creators of that character, and give proper credit. So it's the same thing with Batman now. You've always had Batman created by Bob Kane and everything that I've ever seen, and now you have Bill Finger added to that credit now that we've actually like unearthed all the evidence that Bill Finger had a large hand in creating Batman as well. It wasn't just the Bob Kane show, as Bob Kane led everybody think all the way up past his death, right? So you have those important things going on. So the same thing is happening here now with Marvel. Stan Lee died a few years ago. Rest in peace, Stan. Steve Ditko, I think is Steve Ditko still alive? He's been in hiding for like a long time. I remember watching like a Jonathan Ross documentary on YouTube a long time ago, like The Search for Steve Ditko. Apparently he still had an office in Manhattan that you could go and like leave a postcard for, and he would sign stuff for you if you wanted to, but you know, he's a bit of a recluse. But anyway, Gene Colan passed away years ago, and Gene Colan was, I think he was on Iron Man #1, or had some substantial creations as well. He's like a legendary artist, but I don't know if he died in poverty, not in poverty or anything, but it certainly wasn't like a multi-millionaire. I think he was doing, I remember him doing interviews with the Comic Geek Speak crew, still doing sketches and commissions into his like, you know, upper 80s or something like that. He was very old. So now these characters are going to be coming into the public domain era, and basically in I want to say it was 1973-78, there was an addition to the copyright law. Sonny Bono headed up this like copyright thing to try and help creators to get their creations back. I want to say it was a shorter amount of time, but anyway, copyright law, there's like two sections of it. There's created before 1970 something, and then after. So we're now entering that phase with the Marvel characters, where you're going to see more and more of these Marvel characters become contentious, and we have these lawsuits where the families of these creators see Marvel, Disney doing, you know, they're selling action figures, they're selling Funko Pops, they're selling t-shirts, they're selling comic books, they're selling movies. They got Disney Plus, which a little piece of the revenue of Disney Plus, you know, 1% of 1 cent is going towards every time that Marvel movie is watched or something like that, right? You also have the theme parks. You got Spider-Man in theme parks, and those theme parks cost a pretty penny. They're selling merch, you know, they're like $150 a ticket per day now. It's insane. So you have a lot of recognition and a lot of merchandising and a lot of money coming from these characters. And now the question is are those copyrights up? What was the intent of the law at the time? What was in the contract that these creators signed? Was there a contract? All this stuff is up in the air, and Marvel Disney are countersuing to protect their investment. They bought Marvel for $4 billion, I think it was. I don't know, it's under $10 billion, but they bought them for a couple $1 billion years ago, and it was a momentous sale. Everybody's like, holy shit, look at that. And so they've made their money back tenfold, and they're seeing their investment come through. You know, Shang-Chi's performing well during this pandemic box office, all this cool stuff, and they want to protect their investment. So of course this giant corporation's gonna sue. They don't really care about the little guy. You know, for years you've kind of heard this from other creators, from recent characters like Ed Brubaker's been very public about, you know, his disappointment with Marvel Disney, that he doesn't get a bigger chunk of change from the Falcon and Winter Soldier movie or Civil War or whatever. You know, anytime Bucky's used, it makes $1 billion. Endgame, you know, maybe does he get all the credit he gets other than a special thanks at the end of the material? Now, Ed Brubaker, when he created the Winter Soldier, probably did sign a work-for-hire contract. So is he entitled to it as much as these original creators, these much older characters? Maybe not. You know, but for years you had like the publisher at DC, Paul Levitz. He's retired now. He's no longer the publisher. Hasn't been for quite some time. But you would hear stories of how Paul Levitz would treat creators in a very generous way. Anytime any creation was used in animation, TV, or movies underneath the Levitz regime, he would cut creators a check. There's a story from Jim Starlin saying he got more money from DC when, what was it? KG Beast was used in Batman v Superman. You're going, KG Beast wasn't in Batman v Superman. He was Anatoly Kuznetsov, or whatever that guy's name that Bruce Wayne was hunting and remember he put his phone down next to the other guy's phone to tap it? That character is the regular name of KG Beast. And so KG Beast was used, and he got a bigger check from KG Beast than he did for all of the appearances of Thanos in the Marvel films. So to put that in perspective of how well Marvel Disney treats their creators versus how well DC was doing a few years ago. Now, I don't know what DC's doing now under the new regime. I hope they're continuing the generosity of the Levitz regime, but it's unclear as to what's being offered and how much, right? So is it fair for sons and daughters to get some money out of their parents' creations? I think in this case it is fair a little bit. And I think, we will see these creators be cut a check, or maybe we won't see it, but certainly I think this news of the suits being filed is probably a move. I'm not a legal analyst at all, but just from listening to other stories or radio stories, I listened to some other legal podcasts and just saying this is probably announced in order to get attention on the case, so that you would have the public say, oh, they absolutely deserve their fair share, or a decent amount. They don't deserve pennies, they deserve more than that. So I would say this is probably a tactic from the creators' lawyers, the heirs' lawyers, to get more attention on the case, and therefore push Marvel Disney into the court of public opinion and put pressure on them to cut them a bigger check. I think currently if you do any work for a company, you're certainly under the impression that it is work for hire. I mean, I think Brubaker probably knew that when he created his Winter Soldier thing. Did he think it was going to take off as much as it did just in terms of the movies? Probably not. So, but that's the risk you run and working this way. And that's why I think you saw Brubaker become burned out by Marvel, and he left, and he's only been doing his creator-owned stuff. He's only been working in television and stuff, and doing creator-owned comics since then, probably because of some of that experience, and just feeling like he got a raw deal or something like that, which everybody is fair to have your feelings. It's just what contract did you sign and what was the intent of the law at the time. So, I think it's fair for these creators and their heirs, their sons and daughters. If your mom and dad are gone and you're a grandkid, I feel less bad for you, because maybe you should have done something earlier, or your parents should have paid more attention. But it's fair to say that the sons and daughters do deserve something. Now that the copyright term is kind of expiring. Now, you can say it's a little unfair that the 75-year mark, like if you're in your 30s and the copyright on your work expires 75 years after you publish it, like you're going to be 85, you might be dead. Most of these original creators that are involved in these characters are passed away. So it is a little unfair that the term is like past of your life term. If you're in your 40s and you create something, you're not going to have the opportunity to refile. And I think that's what the newer copyright law shortened that. I believe it shortened that time to 35 years or something like that, so that if you did create something in your 30s or 40s, you would have the opportunity to reclaim the copyright of it in your lifetime. So I think that's what the Sonny Bono stuff was about. But all in all, I think this is it's a publicity thing, and I think it's fair for the heirs to raise some publicity and get some money out of it. I certainly don't think it's fair for a corporation to buy all the characters and own all the copyrights forever and ever and ever, especially when you have individual people who, years and years ago in the 40s, 50s, 60s didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I think now, if you're creating something for Marvel or Disney, you certainly know that you have absolutely no rights to this at all, and you should be under no impression that you do. So, fair warning, I think everybody knows right now who's doing this comics work or creating work for cartoons or animation or movies, all that stuff. If you're working for the company, it is properly the company. And most of this stuff too is like standard procedure. When you're working for a large corporation, you will sign something that says anything I work on while I work for this company during work hours, or sometimes it's after work hours too, is legal property of that company, because they are under the impression, like, if it's in the same world, it does belong to them, so it's not just creations and comic books. It's IP everywhere. It's coding, it's inventing, it's all this stuff. So just be aware of what the conditions are when you're creating something, and separate yourself from that if you really have a good idea and you want to create it, or sell a product or something, so that you don't get in that legal trouble. But always consult a lawyer first, right? Don't listen to me. I'm not a legal expert. But I mean, my opinion is, I think it's fair. I think it's, these characters, did create a lot of money for this company. And it's fair for sons and daughters to get a check. If your grandson and your mom and dad passed away as well, I feel less bad for you. I think sons and daughters is more fair in my mind, because, like, if your dad or, the creators were still alive and they had profited properly from their creation when they were alive, you probably would have seen that money. It's fair to say you might have had a better education. You might have not lived in a one-bedroom house. You might have lived in a bigger house. You might have been able to go to the school that you wanted to go to. You might have been able to have an inheritance. You might have been able to start a business off that money that your mom or dad had. So that's why I'm saying, like, sons and daughters of the original creators are owed something. Grandchild, I feel less bad for. And my sympathy is less towards them, just because you're one generation removed. Like, it's not like I don't want anything. Like, my grandparents have all passed. I don't want anything from their estates. Certainly there was nothing to give, but I didn't feel any sense of entitlement that they did something, you know what I mean? But if, like, my dad passed away and he created something, I would feel some sort of way about it, right? So I think that's where my thoughts are coming from. So let me know down below what you guys think of this whole situation in the comments, and we will discuss it down there. Thank you guys for watching. We will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.